U.S. authorities discovered a drug tunnel between San Diego and Tijuana. The tunnel, the length of 6 football fields and 6 stories below ground, has rail tracks, ventilation, and electricity.
It was the largest and most sophisticated smuggling tunnel ever discovered in American history. Federal agents uncovered a vast underground passage running deep beneath the United States and Mexico border. When federal agents broke through its walls, they found a sprawling underground passage fitted with lights, rails, and ventilation. What began as a routine investigation soon exposed a chilling network of criminal power and a terrifying operation unlike anything the nation had ever seen. A shocking discovery buried beneath the border. The discovery began as a simple routine inspection in the dusty industrial stretch of Otay Mesa, a warehouse zone that sits right along the U.S.-Mexico border just south of San Diego. This area is known for its heavy truck traffic, long rows of storage facilities, and constant movement of goods between the two countries. On that particular morning, U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents were not expecting to find anything out of the ordinary. They were following up on a report from Mexican authorities who had noticed some suspicious soil disturbances near a cargo truck parking lot on the Tijuana side of the border, very close to the international airport. The pattern of the soil did not look natural, which made Mexican investigators suspect that something underground might be going on. In response to this information, American agents brought in specialized equipment to investigate from the U.S. side. They drilled a small opening through the ground in one of the Otay Mesa warehouses that sat near the border fence. As the camera probe was lowered, the lens slipped into an empty space beneath the surface. The camera continued to drop deeper and deeper until it finally hit the floor of a massive underground passage. When the live video appeared on the monitor, the agents watching were stunned into silence. What they saw was not a rough hand-dug tunnel like the ones they had uncovered in the past. Instead, the video revealed a massive reinforced corridor stretching out far into the distance. Later measurements showed that it extended for more than 1.3 kilometers, which is about 4,309 feet, and reached a depth of nearly 21 meters underground. The tunnel began beneath the truck lot in Tijuana and ran all the way to a cluster of unmarked warehouses on the U.S. side of Otay Mesa, cleverly hidden behind the area's security perimeter. While officials publicly praised the operation as a major success in stopping potential smuggling activity, some of the agents who entered the tunnel privately shared a different reaction. They told investigators that what they saw underground did not look like the kind of structure a drug cartel would build in secret. It looked more like something planned, designed, and executed by a team with professional construction skills, access to high-grade materials, and advanced equipment. The work seemed too clean, too consistent, and too expensive for ordinary traffickers. The more the agents looked, the harder it became to dismiss the growing suspicion that this tunnel was only one piece of something much bigger. Engineering perfection and purpose. When investigators began mapping the tunnel's structure in detail, what they uncovered surprised even the most experienced engineers on the team. The underground passage was not only massive in size, but built with a level of accuracy and craftsmanship rarely seen in criminal operations. The concrete walls were evenly poured and reinforced at precise intervals, creating a perfectly symmetrical corridor that appeared more like a public utility tunnel than a smuggling route. Every surface was sealed with layers of insulation foam, which prevented moisture buildup and kept the interior temperature stable. The entire tunnel was measured and aligned with almost mathematical precision, showing no sign of uneven digging or rushed construction. Electrical conduits ran neatly along the upper section of the tunnel. The quality of the wiring and the clarity of the labeling made it clear that the work had not been done by amateurs. Engineers on site began to suspect that whoever built the tunnel must have included trained specialists, possibly civil engineers or electricians, who had been secretly hired or coerced by organized crime groups to participate in the project. As agents continued their sweep, they came across a sealed maintenance bay deep within the tunnel. Inside that small chamber, they discovered racks filled with electronic hardware, including circuit boards, spools of fiber optic cable, and several industrial-grade batteries. Everything appeared to have been intentionally wiped clean, leaving no fingerprints or identifying marks. The setup looked like a control center that could have been used to monitor the tunnel's systems or operate its equipment remotely. Homeland Security officials later seized all of the materials and moved them to a secure government facility. The items were officially classified as part of a technology seizure, although details of their analysis were never made public. Several investigators later suggested that the recovered electronics were compatible with real-time environmental monitoring technology. These are advanced systems designed to track air quality, temperature, and ground movement, which are often used in deep earth construction projects or military-grade infrastructure. The presence of such components raised serious questions about who had designed the tunnel and for what larger purpose. While the official explanation framed it as an elaborate drug tunnel, some insiders quietly speculated it might have served a dual function: smuggling contraband while simultaneously testing underground transport routes that could evade traditional border surveillance. If true, it wasn't just a tunnel, it was a prototype. And when investigators traced that prototype's origins, all signs led back to one name: the Sinaloa Cartel. The Sinaloa signature. Even with all the unanswered questions about the tunnel's technology and design, investigators had no doubt about who was behind it. Every sign pointed toward the Sinaloa Cartel. For years, this organization had set the standard for smuggling innovation along the U.S.-Mexico border. Under the leadership of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the Sinaloa Cartel transformed the act of tunneling into a core part of its criminal operations. Starting in the 1980s, El Chapo's teams used the border region like a carefully planned map, creating a network of underground passages that stretched from Tijuana to Arizona and beyond. These tunnels became the arteries through which billions of dollars worth of cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine flowed north into the United States. El Chapo once said tunnels were better than airplanes, a former DEA agent once explained in an interview. They don't crash, and they don't talk. That quote, according to many investigators, summed up the cartel's entire approach. The tunnels were silent, hidden, and almost impossible to trace back to their operators. They also allowed the cartel to move massive quantities of product without risking seizures at surface checkpoints or border crossings. When El Chapo was captured in 2016 and later extradited to the United States, many assumed that Sinaloa's empire would collapse without his leadership. Instead, the organization quickly adapted and evolved. Control shifted to Ismael El Mayo Zambada and to El Chapo's sons, who became known collectively as Los Chapitos. These new leaders made strategic changes to keep the cartel profitable and powerful. Rather than depending solely on traditional plant-based drugs such as cocaine or heroin, they began investing heavily in the production of synthetic substances. The most important of these was fentanyl, an extremely potent synthetic opioid that requires only small quantities to produce strong effects. This shift proved to be both highly efficient and devastating. Unlike cocaine or heroin, which rely on crops that must be grown and processed, fentanyl can be synthesized in laboratories using chemical precursors. These ingredients are much easier to transport discreetly, and they produce a drug that is far more profitable by weight. Today, fentanyl is responsible for over 70,000 overdose deaths in the United States each year, and investigators believe Sinaloa's operations play a major role in that crisis. According to several analysts, the newly discovered tunnel may have been part of this newer phase of cartel activity. Instead of carrying finished narcotics, it might have been designed to move fentanyl precursor chemicals that had been imported from factories in Asia. Those chemicals could then be transported underground to secret processing labs around Tijuana, where the final product would be manufactured. Once the fentanyl was ready, it could be shipped through the same tunnel system directly into the U.S., avoiding all inspection points along the surface. One senior DEA analyst explained that samples collected from the tunnel's ventilation shafts contained traces of several chemical compounds. These matched substances that are commonly used in the production of fentanyl. He described the setup as cleaner, faster, and quieter than previous smuggling methods. They could move thousands of pounds of precursor chemicals without ever crossing a checkpoint, he said. This system would have allowed the cartel to operate with almost no physical interaction with law enforcement, significantly reducing risk and cost. Still, the evidence didn't stop at just drugs. What investigators found next hinted at something even more secretive and unsettling. Those clues emerged from a small, sealed chamber deep within the tunnel, a place investigators would later call the Hidden Bay. The hidden evidence, when investigators began removing sandbags that had been stacked to block what looked like an abandoned exit, they did not expect to uncover anything significant. However, behind that barrier, they discovered a narrow passage that led into a small, sealed chamber. Internal reports would later identify this section as a secondary storage bay. The space was cramped and dimly lit, with the faint smell of chemicals in the air. Around the room were plastic drums, sealed metal barrels, and several stacks of heavy metal crates. At first glance, investigators assumed the materials were leftovers from construction or maintenance work. But when they began opening the containers, they realized the contents were something entirely different. Inside the barrels and drums, agents found a mixture of industrial solvents, cooling packs, and various chemical agents. Many of these items are commonly used in narcotics production and laboratory processing. The crates, however, drew immediate attention. Several of them bore foreign shipping labels printed in simplified Chinese or Cyrillic text. This detail immediately raised concerns about international sourcing and potential cooperation with suppliers overseas. Chemical testing on samples from these containers confirmed the presence of NPP and ANPP, two key chemical precursors essential in the production of fentanyl. In one unmarked crate, agents discovered an assortment of sealed glass vials, tubing systems, and small-scale laboratory instruments. These materials looked like they had been prepared for portable or experimental use rather than full-scale manufacturing. The discovery prompted investigators to call in chemical specialists to analyze the samples on site. What those specialists found changed the entire direction of the investigation. The vials contained a synthetic neurochemical compound that appeared to be something new, a hybrid substance engineered to affect human brain chemistry directly. According to early laboratory analysis, this compound had properties unlike those of traditional narcotics. In small, controlled doses, it could reduce anxiety and suppress independent thought, making a person unusually compliant. But when administered in larger quantities, it triggered far more extreme effects. Test results indicated that it heightened aggression, eliminated fear responses, and dramatically reduced sensitivity to pain. In effect, the compound could turn a person into a hyper-aggressive state of obedience, able to follow orders without hesitation or emotional restraint. Internal assessment reports later described the discovery as a chemical conditioning formula that blurred the boundary between drug experimentation and psychological manipulation. Analysts who reviewed the evidence stated that the compound represented an attempt to alter human behavior at a biological level. One leaked memo summarized the situation as bioengineering on the edge of human experimentation. The same report also suggested that the setup inside the tunnel had not been meant for typical drug production or smuggling. Instead, it appeared to be a controlled testing site designed for research or limited trials. A federal analyst who spoke anonymously about the case offered an even more disturbing interpretation. "We're not just dealing with illegal narcotics here," he explained. "This is behavioral engineering. Someone was experimenting with ways to create controllable human subjects. People who could be conditioned chemically to obey and perform violent acts without hesitation." His statement reflected the growing concern among investigators that the operation inside the tunnel was part of something larger than organized crime. It suggested a deliberate effort to merge the fields of narcotics chemistry, neuroscience, and psychological control. Publicly, U.S. authorities denied that any active chemical or biological materials had been found in the tunnel. They stated that the seized items were only standard evidence related to drug manufacturing. Privately, however, multiple sources confirmed that the materials had been quietly transferred to a secure government facility in Arizona for further study. Officials refused to release any additional details about the analysis or what was ultimately learned from the samples. The discovery left investigators unsettled. The scale and sophistication of the setup suggested planning and resources that went far beyond the reach of a single cartel. It also raised uncomfortable questions about who might have funded or authorized such an operation, and for what purpose. If this tunnel was just one piece of a much larger puzzle, then the pattern would have to be traced tunnel by tunnel. And when agents began comparing this find to past tunnel busts along the border, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. A disturbing pattern beneath the border. Over the past 2 decades, the Baja California corridor has earned a reputation as one of the most heavily tunneled regions in the world. Beneath its busy roads and industrial zones lies a hidden network of underground passages connecting Tijuana to San Diego. Since 2006, U.S. authorities have discovered at least 15 of these advanced tunnels, most concentrated around the Otay Mesa area. Each new find has revealed a level of technical expertise that continues to surprise investigators. The region's geography plays a major role in this phenomenon. The dense clay soil on both sides of the border provides a stable foundation that supports long, reinforced tunnels without frequent collapses. In addition, the endless warehouses and transport hubs above ground provide the perfect cover, masking noise from excavation and concealing construction vehicles that come and go at all hours of the day. One of the most well-known discoveries occurred in 2014, when agents uncovered a tunnel stretching nearly 904 meters between Tijuana and San Diego. That find drew national attention because it included electrical lighting, a functional rail transport system, and a hydraulic lift that connected to a warehouse on the U.S. side. For years, that tunnel stood as the most sophisticated example ever found along the border, until the recent Otay Mesa discovery surpassed it in both size and complexity. The new tunnel's length, precision, and engineering have led many analysts to believe that the technology and planning behind these operations have reached an entirely new level. When the Homeland Security Mapping Division began analyzing blueprints and structural data from every tunnel uncovered since 2010, investigators noticed something that did not make sense. Many of the tunnels, even those attributed to rival cartels, shared identical design features. The same measurements appeared repeatedly: identical wall thickness, tunnel diameter, and reinforcement spacing. The same materials were used for concrete, insulation, and support beams. Even the electrical wiring patterns matched, down to the placement of light fixtures and junction boxes. These consistencies were too precise to be coincidental. Experts reviewing the data began to suspect that the construction of these tunnels might not be handled independently by different cartels at all. Instead, it appeared that a single group of engineers or contractors might be responsible for building multiple tunnels for different organizations. This suggested the presence of a professional underground construction network, a specialized subcontractor system operating quietly across borders, offering tunneling services to the highest bidder. Such coordination would explain the near-identical engineering standards found across unrelated smuggling operations. A classified Customs and Border Protection intelligence summary from 2023, which has not been publicly released, addressed these findings directly. According to sources familiar with the report, the analysis concluded that the tunnel construction patterns pointed toward a global supply chain. The report stated that materials and machinery used in these tunnels had likely been sourced from at least 3 different continents. It also recommended closer monitoring of heavy equipment and industrial supplies entering Mexican border states, particularly shipments of drilling machinery and specialized concrete mixtures that could be used for underground work. Despite the significance of these findings, the recommendations were quietly set aside. No major policy changes or investigations followed. One agent familiar with the decision later commented that the report was likely ignored because of the implications. No one wanted to admit how advanced the cartels had become, he said. The idea that organized crime groups could manage international logistics and engineering networks as efficiently as major corporations was a reality few agencies were ready to confront. The discoveries left investigators with a growing sense that the tunnels represented more than a smuggling strategy. They seemed to reflect a level of organization and purpose that extended far beyond narcotics. And as the team continued to trace the connections between these underground structures, they uncovered evidence pointing toward an even more disturbing use. One that involved not drugs or contraband, but human lives. The human cargo corridor. During a routine inspection of one of the tunnel's smaller side shafts, agents came across several unexpected items scattered across the ground. Among the debris were worn backpacks, small pairs of children's shoes, and a collection of empty plastic water bottles. At first, investigators believed these belonged to the laborers who had built or maintained the tunnel. It was common for workers involved in such construction projects to leave behind personal items after completing their shifts. However, once the items were sent for forensic testing, the results told a much different story. DNA samples collected from the shoes and backpacks matched records belonging to several missing persons from Central America. Many of them were individuals who had last been seen traveling north toward the US-Mexico border before mysteriously disappearing. According to a field report prepared by Homeland Security Investigations, the evidence suggested that the tunnel had been repurposed not only for smuggling drugs but also for transporting people. The report described the passage as structurally sound and fully reinforced, with clear indications that it had been adapted for safe human movement. The walls were clean, the air circulation system was functioning, and the lighting was adequate for extended travel. This setup would have allowed people to be moved quietly and securely beneath the surface, avoiding detection from drones, surveillance towers, and motion sensors that monitor the area above ground. Investigators concluded that the tunnel could have been used to transport both paying clients seeking illegal entry into the United States and victims of organized human trafficking networks operating under cartel control. A former federal contractor with experience investigating tunnel systems in Nogales and Calexico explained how such operations often function. They use migrants not just as customers but also as labor, he said. They bring them in to dig, to haul materials, and to build the tunnels. Once the work is done, those same people disappear. Some are never seen again. His statement reflected a pattern that had become increasingly apparent in border investigations over the years. Vulnerable migrants, often desperate for safe passage, were exploited as a disposable workforce in the construction of these underground systems. Despite these findings, Customs and Border Protection officials minimized the human smuggling angle when the discovery became public. Their statements emphasized drug trafficking and avoided mention of any evidence involving people. However, internal analyses circulated within federal agencies painted a much more alarming picture. Analysts warned that if a cartel had the resources and expertise to construct a 1.3-kilometer reinforced tunnel complete with rail systems and ventilation, then it was fully capable of using that infrastructure for far more than narcotics. The same tunnels that carried chemicals and weapons could just as easily transport groups of people across the border without any chance of detection. One analyst summarized the situation bluntly, noting that no physical barrier, no matter how deep or advanced, could stop a network operating underground. This may help explain why, when the story eventually reached the public, many of the tunnel's most disturbing details were quietly omitted from official reports and news releases. The official silence. When the discovery was officially announced in January 2020, government officials delivered their statements with careful precision. They confirmed that a massive tunnel had been uncovered beneath the US-Mexico border, but provided only limited details. According to the public release, no drugs had been seized, no arrests had been made, and no confirmed exit point had been located on the US side. For most people, it sounded like a routine smuggling case without major consequence. But for those who had seen the evidence firsthand, the omissions were impossible to ignore. According to several law enforcement sources familiar with the operation, members of the San Diego Tunnel Task Force were instructed to manage the situation very carefully. This task force, which brings together personnel from the Drug Enforcement Administration, Customs and Border Protection, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Homeland Security Investigations, was reportedly under significant pressure to control the narrative. Sensitive materials related to the case, particularly evidence that pointed to chemical experimentation and possible human trafficking, were sealed away under national security exemptions. Agents involved in the early investigation were later told not to discuss certain findings, even among other departments. To this day, journalists and researchers who have filed Freedom of Information Act requests regarding the tunnel continue to receive the same standard response: information withheld due to ongoing investigations. Experts familiar with federal procedures say that phrase is often used when information is not simply under review but permanently classified. Officially, authorities claim the tunnel has been filled with concrete and sealed to prevent future use. However, some security analysts question whether the entire structure was ever fully examined before it was closed. There are credible reports suggesting that several side passages and branching corridors were never explored in their entirety. If those branches are connected to additional tunnels or undiscovered exits, the full extent of the network may still lie hidden underground. A retired DEA investigator summarized the uncertainty with striking honesty. "That tunnel wasn't the end of something," he said. "It was the beginning of something we still don't understand." His statement reflected a lingering fear among many who worked on the case that what they had found beneath the border was only one piece of a much larger operation that continues unseen below the surface. What do you think about the discoveries beneath this tunnel? Comment down below.